I am going to go through a kind of brief setting of from beginning to now point of my life type of story. And I do want you to know viewer discretion is advised. If you're not into real talk, or if you're not in a really sometimes it might be too much for people on some things. So I do warn you, it's not the worst that's ever happened to anybody, and it's not the best neither. It's just kind of in between. So here it goes. Basically, I was born in Houston, Texas at St. Joseph's Hospital, and as soon as I was born, I was taken away from my mother's arms and put into my grandmother's arms for one reason. Growing up, my mother wasn't the best of behaving children, and at an early age she decided to become pretty much like a stripper, and even to the point of becoming a prostitute and a drug addict. Now, I love my mother, I just don't get along with my mother. So after a couple years of being with my grandmother, my mother decides to ask if she can have visiting rights for me to come over to her house and start visiting her. So I'm about maybe 3 or 4 years old, at that time, and my grandmother okays it. So I start going to my mother's house and start seeing and visiting with my mother. And the earliest memory I have really of this is my father, and his name is Tommy. And he has really long hair. He has like a bandana he wears over it, and he doesn't drink his beer like a normal person, putting it to his lips. He always drinks his beer holding it over his mouth. And from what I know of him, he was a drug dealer and a alcoholic. Well, one day, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was still pretty young. My father had owed the supplier some money, and so the supplier sent some goons to the house that my mother and him were staying in, but he wasn't home. And out of demand for more money, they threatened to kill me and put a shotgun to my head. And when they had the shotgun to my head, my mother begged them to not kill me, that she would do anything. So unfortunately, they actually took her to the back and raped her for hours. And that is something I will ever be grateful for my mother for, is because she spared my life at that moment in time, and she actually cared about me, and she took that suffering and that pain so that she could bear that forever, and I'm sorry for that. A couple years later, my father stepped out the picture, and my mother became a prostitute, and she became pretty hardcore on drugs. So at this point, she was usually always passed out when she was home, and she would bring random people to the house. Now, the first situation of molestations that I can remember is one of her boyfriends doing it to me, and his name was Alberto, and he basically did it to me for a while, every single day. There were other people that she brought home that done similar things. I just really can't remember. And so the crowd that I ran around with, because my mother was usually passed out and stuff, there was these kids, and they would get mouse traps and stuff with mice in them from their houses. I guess their parents had mouse traps everywhere. And the mice would actually get caught in the mouse traps, and they would still be alive. And so they would drown the mice in little puddles and stuff, and cut them up and break their necks and torture them basically. And they would also do that with big roaches. They would light them on fire until they blew up, and so they were just killing and torturing small creatures. And I started doing it myself. I witnessed it, and it was like the first segment of the maliciousness, the anger, the sadness, all the things that were in me at that point because of my life and the things that were happening. they were building up. And I was actually showing symptoms of becoming an early diagnosable psychopath. So a couple years later, after these instances I've been talking about, I went to what I perceived to be my grandfather's house. He was like a grandfather to me because he always took care of me. You know, he was always helping me, buying me stuff, being nice to me. And my mother was dating him, of course, and kind of sleeping with him for stuff. And he always loved my mother, you know, but I still seen him like a grandfather. So he had two sons. One's name was Mark, and he was kind of into the big hair, you know, because it was like early 90s and such. And he was into like the python, you know, he had this really big snake and stuff that he wore around his like shoulders, and he played in a band, he played drums. And his other son, his name was Jesse, and he was a gay guy. And he was always home with me. He basically kind of raised me on the side of my grandfather, because that's where my mother would always start dropping me off at while she would go do whatever she was doing. And at this point, I was kind of living with my mother, mainly. I wasn't just visiting, I was kind of living with her. So she would drop me off there, and I'd spend days, you know, with this guy Jesse, and eventually he started sexually molesting me. And at one point in time when he was doing it, he actually would start holding a pillow over my face, because I guess he didn't want to look at me. And he would do it to me, and like he would suffocate me almost to the point of me passing out. And like I would start yelling and screaming and stuff. Like I would try not to. I'd try to hold my breath. And so those were some sadistic things that kind of happened to me on the side. There's been worse, as I've said, but you know, it's just throughout the years of the molestations and stuff that happened to me, that was kind of the more violent ones, you know. Most of the time people just talked me into doing stuff or asked me to do stuff, and I would just go along with it, but that was more of a violent type of situation. And so that kind of added to the mental, I guess, maliciousness and anger and stuff I had within me. And, you know, a couple years after that, I moved back to my grandmother's house. And a lot of molestations took place when I was with my mother at that time. So I went to my grandmother's house, and this was like a spirit that followed me almost. Like, all the kids that I knew, and I was a kid back then too, my neighbors, like actually about 2 of them would actually sexually engage with me on a regular basis and taught me into doing things with them. And they were around my age, which was kind of strange. And I would do so. And I even got to the point of like, I would ride the short bus because I was kind of an angry child. And the short bus was a bus for special ed kids, or for people that were in what we called BAC, bad acting children. Now, the bus is only about 5 or 6 seats back, maybe that. And so there was these kids on there, and this one kid, his name was Chris Evans, he would actually talk me into taking my clothes off and doing things with him, and he even talked a few other kids into doing these things. So we were literally running around on the bus with no clothes on, doing things to each other sexually. And the bus driver, she would watch. And she would actually warn us whenever, you know, we were near the house. Like, this is how powerfully crazy this sexual spirit thing or whatever it was in my life. And so, it was pretty disturbing. I mean, like, to be honest, that the bus driver was even in on it, you know. So a couple years after that, you know, I kind of, like, I was angry and stuff. I would still kill and torture small animals and, like, dogs and all kinds of things, you know. I got jumped by a bunch of people I thought were my friends, like a whole group of them gathered together and beat the crap out of me, and my response to it was to chase them down the road with a butcher knife, screaming at the top of my lungs, ready to just stab all of them to death. I would like picture myself stabbing people to death in slow motion with classical music like Mozart or something playing in the background, like blood going everywhere. Yeah, I was pretty angry and sad. And those were early forms of psychosis, so not of like being a psychopath. And you know, thank God I didn't turn out that way. I could have been a rapist, a murderer, a psychopath, anything. Well, a couple years later down the road, you know, I started finding independence thanks to someone that helped raise me in my life. And I started working and started making money and stuff. And I basically ended up getting my getting a way to actually stay at a place, you know, pay rent. Well, eventually I worked my way out to the place where I grew up at and lived across the street from my grandmother. Now, when I lived there, I paid rent to the roommates that were there and stuff, and right across the street from me there were these people that lived there I grew up with, and there were 3 brothers that lived there and a woman. That was their mother and their dad. And the oldest brother actually sexually molested me as well when we were growing up. And when I told people about it when I was younger and brought it out to the parents and everybody, I was called a liar and of course all this stuff. Well, his younger brother, not the youngest brother, he was a gangster, and so was the older brother. And they were both gangbangers, they were both into drugs, they were both into like being drug dealers and all this stuff. Well, while I was staying at the place across the street, I had decided one day I wanted some, you know, money for marijuana. And I ended up stealing some stuff, kind of being talked into. Like, I was around this guy that was a thief I also grew up with. He stole all the time, and I really never stole. It wasn't my gift, my talent, my thing. But I decided right then, you know, maybe because this is my friend's house, he kind of raised me and stuff. He's not here no more. His dad lives here. His dad's really old. You know, we got 2 roommates here. No one's gonna notice though that this is missing from the back garage. And so I took like a table saw and some other things I was going to take to the pawn shop. I didn't think no one would notice. Well, the next day, turns out his dad actually walked around all the time and looked at the stuff that was in the garages and everything, and he knew it was missing. So he ended up calling the private investigators out. Now, when he called the private investigators, they of course wanted to question me about what happened, did I know anything, and he already suspected that I was the one that did it. And of course, you know, I'm trying to convince him I don't know what happened, I don't know who took the stuff, you know, I didn't see anything. Well, during these sessions that I had with the private investigators, the guy across the street, of course, he suspected that I was talking to him about the police, or talking to the police about him. And so, you know, having all the power he had and the resources and pretty much unlimited money and gangbangers at his disposal and all this stuff, he decided that he wanted to, you know, first he tried to confront me. So he invited me to his little brother's birthday party, and I went there, you know, I got drunk and stuff, we were all chilling, then he told me to come out to the street, so I did. And the guy that was a thief that I grew up with, he warned me and said I need to go home, but I didn't listen. And so I went out to the street, and we were surrounded by this dude's goons, and like all these people were out here. And he made me and the other guy fight, because the other guy said that I was snitching on him to the police, because he beat him down until he said exactly what he wanted to hear. This other guy, the thief that I grew up with, he wasn't really a fighter. And I heard him a couple nights before getting his butt beat, literally for an hour straight. He was screaming at the top of his lungs. It was a couple houses down. It turned out that it was that guy beating him and kicking him and punching him, beating him, and to the point of him confessing that I was talking to the cops about him. instead of the stuff I stole, which is what the guy told him, that I stole some stuff and the police were out there, but he didn't believe him. So he beat him until he said what he wanted to hear. So then the guy orchestrates a plan to make us fight each other. So while we're fighting each other and all this stuff, one of his goons ends up stepping in and ends up hitting me in the face. And like and says, you know, he was surprised because he had knocked me out one hit or whatever. And so the guy comes up to me and goes, you know who I am? He goes, you know, I got power, man. He's like, you know my older brother, you said those things before about him, which, you know, whatever, which were true. And you know how much power I got, and I could kill you if I wanted to. I could destroy you. So after he made this threat to me, he took all his goons and he left. Well, a couple nights later, my roommates were acting weird. And they told me, one of them told me, you know, we need to go up to the corner store. And I was like, alright. So I get in the truck with him, we go to the corner store. Well, on the way there was a car that was just sitting there, and it kind of made me feel suspicious. It was at the corner of our road, and I just got this bad vibe from it. And we went to the store, we sat there like 10 minutes, because it was just a corner store, convenience store, and I'm thinking, what is this dude doing? And so he finally comes out, and he gets in, and I just have this bad feeling like something's gonna happen. We end up driving back, and as soon as we get to that spot where that car was, it was still sitting there. But all of a sudden it starts following us, and I instantly just get like my spidey senses kick in, and like I just put my head down between my legs kind of a little bit to hide, because I'm thinking something told me they were going to shoot me through the back window. So I literally just chilled there, and the dude starts saying, yeah, keep your head down, keep your head down. And I'm thinking, why are you telling me that, bro? You're supposed to be saying I'm tripping or something, right? And so, I literally was freaking out. Well, this car follows us all the way back to our driveway. And then once we pull in, it pulls in behind us and turns around and leaves. So I jump out the truck, he jumps out the truck. He goes upstairs to the porch, and the other roommate starts arguing with him about how he needs to take me to the backyard. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Well, they start arguing together to each other, and he says, well, I thought they were just going to hurt him. I thought we had a whole different plan. He's like, no, they're going to kill him. And who cares, right? Like, they start arguing about this right in front of me. Like, they were just out their minds or something. You know, you don't do that, for one. That whole night, there were situations that just proved to me God was working and doing things. Because these guys, I knew them. They wouldn't just start doing that type of stuff. I know them. They handle their drugs well, and they just don't do that type of stuff. It was just very weird. They started arguing, pushing each other, talking about how they were supposed to like hurt me and kill me and all this other stuff. And so I decided just out of nowhere to blurt out, hey, give me the keys to the truck, I'll go to the back. So then they gave me the keys to the truck. Okay, on top of all that, they give me the keys to the truck. And come to find out, the guy actually paid them off in drugs so that they wouldn't, you know, tell anybody about my disappearance, quote unquote. And so, literally, I grabbed the keys, I walked out to the truck, and I'm thinking, what am I gonna do now? And I heard a voice in my head as clear as day. It told me, run. So I literally threw the keys down and took off running to the other side of the yard where the cow fences were, where the cow fields were, and I jumped over the cow fence and I ran out to the cow fields, and I hit my knees instinctively, and I started praying to God. And I never pray, guys. Like, back then, I was an atheist or something like that. I didn't really think about God. I didn't think God did exist or didn't exist. I just lived my life. That was it. There was no other care in the world. And so I really acted satanic, if you would ask me. Like, I had a lot of anger and psychotic, crazy side issues. I outgrew most of them by that point in my life, but, well, earlier to this car happening, a couple days before that, let's say a little bit after I got beat down by his goons, I was inside the house, right? And I never read a Bible in my life. I never picked one up before. And something led me to this tiny little New Testament Bible for some reason. I picked it up and I opened it. And when I opened it, I read it. And the first thing I read was about the tax collector that really, really wanted to talk to and see Jesus so bad, and Jesus to see him, that he climbed a tree. And while he climbed this tree, you know, there were all these crowds around and everything, and that's pretty much as far as I read. I don't know why my volume just turned up all by itself, but that's kind of annoying. Alright, so, you know, I just read that part and I just started crying, like tears just started falling from my eyes and I couldn't explain why. And I set the Bible down. At the time I didn't know that this was the Holy Spirit working within me. I didn't comprehend it. And so a day later or so, I started feeling this really cold, sick, deathly feeling crawling up my spine, and I can't explain it. It was like, you ever seen a cat when they freak out, they curve their back up and they just sense like something's they get so freaked out? I sensed something like just crawling up my spine, and it felt deathly. And so I looked out my window and I seen the guy across the street. And he was actually the gangbanger dude. He was talking to all these people. He was pointing all these different directions and stuff. And they had like trucks and going by, taking pictures of my house and like cars and stuff. And I just knew something was wrong. I'm like, oh no, this isn't right. And so that very night, actually, I went to sleep. And for the first time, which I never prayed before that I'm aware of, I laid there and I started praying, and I was asking God to please help me and forgive me and to like help my families and stuff. And I'm not the type of person to think about this, to pray or to, I didn't care about it. It's nothing I thought about. It's so weird that it just started happening to me, you know. And so again, it was a spirit working within me. Well, that night I went to sleep, and the dream I had, it was about me getting on this, there was a school bus, like a yellow one, like kids ride, and it was a full-size one, and there were a bunch of people on it, and I was on it, and they were all adults, and I was an adult, and this bus drove, and I couldn't really tell where it was driving or whatever. But when we finally got to the point where we crossed over this little bridge, and there was this pure spring that was underneath it, that was just running through. And everybody gets off the bus when it stops. It goes to this really beautiful manor type of house. And these white-robed people come out, and they're in white robes. And they look human, they don't have wings or anything. And they're just wearing white robes, and they greet all the people and they let them pass and everything. And when it's my turn and I go to walk in, they stop me and they say, no, you can't come in yet, it's not your time. And they turn me around and they send me back to the bus. Well, I get on the school bus and the school bus ends up leaving, and I wake up. Now, the next night I went to sleep, I had a dream. And this dream was about a boulder, a naturally rounded boulder. Have you ever seen a naturally rounded boulder? It isn't round like a ball, but it's round, but it has like little cut marks on it, kind of looking, kind of, I don't know how, chisel-y kind of round. And if you were to take it and cut it in half and then take the top part off, you would have a flat top part and then a rounded off bottom part. It looked just like that. And in the front there's a little gap area, in the back there's a gap area where you can walk forward or backward onto it. And on the sides, the two curved sides, there were these like 3 to 4 foot railings that were made of wood. And next to me on my left and right, there were these 14-foot tall angels with staves and these masks on. And they were guarding me, I guess, or showing me, or escorting me, all of the above. And this thing is floating, okay? And it's floating above this gigantic cavern thing. And when I look up, I see that this in-bubbled type of dome, stone carved, but it's more like a perfect type of rounded dome looking thing, but it's made of stone. And it's really big. And I look down and I see this glow, and it's like an orangish yellow, and I realize it's lava. And so as we're going down, this rock thing that we're on is descending, there's this lava, and I hear screams as we get closer, which I did hear screams. People sounded like they were in pain or torment or sad or something, but I mean, if I was resting in lava, I probably would be too. Anyway, so this rock goes and it actually descends into the lava. And the only way my brain can interpret this is that the lava is the lake of, I guess, fire, which I didn't know anything about, guys. By this point, I never read the Bible before, okay? So my mind was a blank slate, and I think God was just working with it. So when I go into this lava, there's no demons, there's no Satan ruling over hell, there's none of this. Actually, it was contrary. There were angels that ruled over hell and guarded over it. And it was like a prison. That's the only way my mind can interpret it. There were these jail cells within lava. I'm guessing it was some type of spiritual jail cell, but my mind couldn't really understand what it was, so interpret it the only way it knew how to. And it looked like bars and a jail cell in lava. And the angel basically showed me there were rows and rows and rows of these, and then underneath rows and rows and rows, and underneath rows and rows and rows, and it basically went infinite, right? And the further he like pointed down, and I looked down, and the further down these jail cells went, and the further down it went, the lava got more red and more intense, and more red and more intense, and more red and more intense, and it went down infinitely. And I believe that God was showing me that there are different levels of hell, that there are different refinements of hell, there are different disciplines, there are different sentences, and there is even to the point of utter destruction and refinement, where your very breath of life comes out of you, and your essence is destroyed utterly and completely, and the breath of life returns back unto Him, in which every being, good or bad, possesses the breath of life of God, including free will and knowledge, which is used to either come against God or be with God. These are just, again, my observations, my opinions, my beliefs, my understandings, my perspective. So please do not put any negative comments in here, put any arguments. I will not argue. That's something I won't do. I'll just disable or block. I will delete your comments and I will block you. So after having this dream, I woke up. Well, for the next week, I kept having segments of dreams about tornadoes consistently every night. And these tornadoes were like whirlwind tornadoes. They were like perfectly shaped, everyone the same size, everyone spaced out the same distance, about 100 feet from each other on all sides. And there was no noise. They were just sounded like it sounded literally like wind just blowing. It's really, really, really peaceful. And so all these places that I would go to in my dream were places I grew up at and stuff. Places that were significant to me, like places from my childhood. And none of these tornadoes ever chased me or tried to hurt me until some of the final dreams. There was this one tornado, it kept trying to get me. And every time it kept trying to chase me down and get me, I'd run from it, I'd flee, I'd go to all these places. and this white truck would always come out of nowhere, and I would jump in the white truck and it would take off and I'd be okay. Now this, in other words, is another dream I've had, and I still don't really understand it. Then I had this final dream, and in this final dream I dreamed that I was in this place, which I just came from actually, called Galveston, Texas, and I was a soldier, and I walked out and I was in like a stadium with nobody around or anything, but it was like a football stadium kind of that was open with a green field, maybe like a high school looking one. And I walked out that little hole thing the football players come out of, that little hallway, and I was dressed in a soldier uniform, like an army kind of one, and I had this thing on my head that didn't really look like I can't really explain it. It was a hat, but it was a hat with no bill, kind of like a Marine hat, I guess. And I don't really know markings or rankings, but it had like all this stuff on it, and like my uniform and stuff. So I didn't know like what rank I was or any of that, or even the colors of it. It was more like a green and brown and stuff like that. And I put my hand up to my hat like I was in just a straight up attention stand with a salute, and I saluted, and I seen in the back of me there was this enormous looking hurricane thing. And then the dream changed to where I was at this house. I never even seen this house yet, but I actually came to live next to this house. And at this house there was all these people. We all ran into this house, and there were pillars in it, which the house didn't actually have these pillars in real life. And we grabbed onto these pillars, and this tornado came and hit the house and sucked all of us up into the tornado. Now I don't know if I got sucked up or not. I remember hanging onto the pillar and my body kind of lifting off the ground and going upward, like lifting upward. But then I woke up. So these were all segmented dreams, including prophecy of things that were going to happen to me. Before I ever knew God, I ever got baptized in the Spirit, any of this stuff, which goes to show, if God wants you, He wants you. It doesn't matter if you've been baptized yet or not. It doesn't matter if you know one thing about the Bible or not. It doesn't matter if you know anything about Jesus or not. God can work through all circumstances. Everything that you see through baptism, through going to church, this is all just ritual and sanctification of what is God's. Putting it aside to say, this is mine, this demonstrates me in action, this is what I own, this is my way, and this is how people know it is me and my way. So after all that happened, and then let's skip on ahead a little bit to the point of me running to the cow fields. I ended up running through the cow field and staying there for a minute, hiding behind trees, and I could hear what was going on, because it's a country, it's nighttime, and you can hear things pretty loudly. So my two roommates come out. They greet the guy that was looking for me. He's like, "Where is he? Where is he at?" They were like, we don't know. And he hit one of my roommates, because the other roommate was like, "No, don't hit him, he doesn't know where he is." He's like, "Why did you tell me? Why did you tell me he left?" And so at this point, I'm kind of tripping, so I take off running, and I end up running through the cow field, like through the woods, just straight up woods for like 2 hours. I don't even know where I am, I'm just running. Well, I'm dodging, like when I finally get to the streets and stuff, and now, like at one point in time, I look behind me, and I swear to you guys, like I promise, like I've seen these shadowy humanoid looking figures that were running after me and looking from behind trees and stuff. I was like, I was like, I'm done. And I jumped the fence and cut my finger open and hit next to the road. Well, every car that came and stuff, I didn't know who was looking for. Dealers everywhere and all kinds of stuff, right? So I'm hiding from every car that comes. I'm laying down low in ditches and stuff every time a car passes by. I don't know who to trust. I don't know what door to go to knock on. I don't know who's who. So I'll try to figure out how I can get a hold of the police to come and, like, you know, help me, because I wanted this. I was just gonna tell them someone was trying to kill me so that they would help me. I wasn't gonna tell them who it was or anything. I was just telling them, you know, this dude's trying to kill me, and I don't really know who it is, but I need this guy off my back. I need some protection. I need something. So I finally, after running for hours, and it starts thundering, and it's like really windy and thundering, but no rain. It just makes the night really creepier and scarier. I see this church, and I recognize the church because I had passed it before. And so I go to this little playground they have, and I get in a slide and I climb in it, and I just sat there for a second, you know, scared, thinking I don't know what to do. And I just felt relief. That's all I can explain. I felt relief. And so I get my head together there for about 10 minutes, and I leave, and I keep running. And as I'm running, I noticed that there's a prison ahead of me, and this is a maximum security prison. They got like residentials that live there, literally guards live on site. They got trained snipers. I mean, this is a maximum security prison, guys. I run up to this prison at nighttime, okay? It's like 2 in the morning or something. And there's nobody at the first checkpoint. Nobody. And I'm thinking, what the heck, right? So all of a sudden this van shows up, and these people are like, what are you doing here? You can't be here. Are you crazy? And I'm like, please call the police, man. I need some help. Someone's trying to kill me. You know, they're after me. And so they end up calling the police. And thankfully I didn't get shot or anything for that. Well, when the police officer comes out, you know, at first I don't notice anything weird. He's talking to me, and I'm just too messed up about my own stuff to really notice, right? So this guy, you know, he's asked me, he goes, you know, have you done any drugs or anything recently? And I was like, no. And I was like, yeah, I smoked some pot tonight, but that's it. Yeah, right? So I said that. Well, because I said that, after I told him someone was trying to kill me, they were after me, they want to take my life, all this stuff, he's like, well, I'm going to arrest you. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I'm going to arrest you because you lied to me. Turn around. And I'm like, oh my God. So he arrests me, puts me in handcuffs, and he puts me in the back of his police car. I get in the police car, there's a chick up front with him. Alright, so I'm thinking, this is weird. And I start saying, oh no. This dude done arrested me just because he wanted to. This dude's probably working for this dude that's after me. And I start tripping, right? So like he gets in, he takes off. As soon as we turn the corner from the prison, this dude peels out, bro. I'm talking about like rocks are flying everywhere and stuff, and he's off. He's going. And I'm like, that is not normal for a cop to do. All of a sudden, this chick up front, her head disappears. Well, guess what she's doing? This chick up front's giving this dude head while he's driving off, okay? This dude ends up hitting over 100 miles per hour. He's swerving all over the road. This chick's up front going down on this dude. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking this dude's going to take me to the cornfields and shoot me execution style on my knees and handcuffs. And just leave my body dead there so that my body can rot and the worms can eat it. And I'm freaking out, right? Well, after about 30 minutes, right, this dude pulls up to the jail, and I'm thinking, oh great, they're just going to take me down to the basement and beat me to death and sick dogs on me, and just dispose of my body instead. So we go inside, he sets me down on a bench, he's talking to these for bloodshot red, he's talking 100 miles per hour, and I'm thinking to myself, really? I'm like, they don't notice this at all? And I'm thinking, they're all in on it, right? Well, all of a sudden, I hear this voice again that comes to me, and I didn't know what this was. To be honest, guys, I just didn't. And it said, ask for PC. And I'm like, huh? So I'm like, hey, give me PC. And they're like, you want pussy care? And that's what they said. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I didn't know what it was, right? So they take me to this room. And it's like this tiny, tiny little room. No windows, no nothing. A toilet, a tiny little bed, that's it. And I'm sitting there for about a day and I'm kind of tripping. Well, I started looking around on the walls. And on the walls are written all these scriptures. And all these scriptures actually relevant to every single event that happened to me in the past 2 months of my life. And I'm thinking, how in the world is this possible? Why is, and like they're written in different pen colorings, they're written in different like almost like maybe different handwriting or something, and they seem like they've been there a very long time. Some of them were faded, like fading, like the stuff just seemed old. And I'm thinking, what is what? How is this happening? So I finally decided to pray again. For the third time, I decided to pray. The first time I was on the couch, the second time the cow field, the third time I'm laying there on this bed thing and I'm praying and I'm like, God, I'm sorry for the mistakes I've made and the things I've done. I'll try better, like I want to serve you. And so I'm there for probably about 3 weeks, maybe 2. And these people are coming and bringing me food, and I'm thinking they're poisoning my food maybe or something. I'm scared. I don't know if it's my last meal. I heard the trustees talking about me and saying my name and stuff, and I'm just kind of freaking out. So when I get out, I ask a police officer. They finally let me out. I ask a police officer to take me to my aunt's house. So he does. So I get to my aunt's house and ask her if I can stay with her because I have nowhere to go. And I'm like, can you please help me? I need some help, and she's like, no, I can't keep you here, sorry. Well, just to cut in between here, growing up, I went to this daycare type of school place for the summers that took care of people that were like from like 8 years old all the way to 15 years old. They had like nap times, you could play video games every once in a while, you watch movies together, they prepared you meals all day, so during the summer times I would go there. And during the summer times while I was there, that's the place I kind of lost my innocence at more of, because a lot of weird sexual messed up events between other kids talking me into like doing stuff with them, and the usual story, which by the way I got in trouble for when I was a kid. So like there's a teacher there named Miss Betty. She was a really good teacher and I really liked her, but I spent many summers at that place. Okay, so this was actually located right across from my aunt's house where she lived for years. And it was literally right across the street by 2 streets. It was behind a giant store. It used to be a grocery store, but it got reconformed into an antique store. So I'm looking through the phone book at my aunt's house now, right? Because I'm looking for somewhere to go. And the first number I looked up and called was this place, it was a ministry that had been open for men that are struggling with drug and alcohol addictions, and it was a non-profitable program, and they took you in, gave you food, shelter, clothing, beds, everything, but the only requirement was you had to try to get a relationship with God. So I called these people, I lied to them, told them I was a pillhead because I needed somewhere to go, and it's not like me to really lie to people. I've been making all kinds of weird mistakes within the last 2 months of my life. Stealing, lying. Anyway, so I lied to them, and they said they would take me. So I was like, oh man, I'm glad I got somewhere. My aunt's like, yeah, I know where that address is. So she ends up getting me in a car, and we end up driving right across the street. And it was the same place I went to whenever I was a kid. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is a church ministry now? And so it's on this little back road by itself. There's only one property next to it, right? It's a pretty big building. Or not really big. It's like a little bigger than a house, a 1-story house, okay? And so right next to it there's another house, and then that's it. The whole road's just surrounded by woods pretty much, besides the store behind it, the open road next to it that leads up or down, and then there's woods in front of it and woods kind of to the left of it. And so I get out and I go inside. I end up meeting the team leader, and little did I know what was in store for me at that place. Now, I spent about a year of my life at this place, okay? So when I first go in, I meet the team leader. His name's Mario. I meet the pastor a little while later. His name is Pastor Michael Gomez. And just so I can give a real quick testimony for these two, Pastor Michael Gomez was a reformed gangster. He used to be a drug dealer. He used to beat people up. He used to be merciless. He used to be a gangbanger, hardcore. And he ended up getting saved at a branch ministry which helped found, it's like the mother church is what we called it. And that was the Victory Family Church. I love the Victory Family, guys. I really think that is a good establishment of church. I've never met a Victory Family that isn't good. Okay? So, he got saved in Houston, Texas, from a church called Victory Family Church. And he ended up making a new branch by his own pocket, his own fundings, and eventually getting help from the mother church as well, and starting this place that I was at now, which by the way is like their third or fourth building they owned, because they had a couple other ones that they started off with. They started off real small. It was a house thing. Then they moved to a new building, which was like a house. Then a new building, which was like another house. But those didn't work out. And then he got that place where I was at, which was really nice. And so he had been struggling for a couple of years for this, you know. And he had been serving God for about 5 or 6 years already. And he had a whole ministry, so, you know. And my team leader, Mario, he was like an older brother to me, which I really loved, and I still love. And his testimony is that he used to be a functioning drug addict. He would literally, you know, his drug of choice was crack. And he would actually do that stuff on the side and nobody would know about it. You know, at first, functioning drug addicts are usually, you can't tell nothing's wrong. Like, he had a good job. You know, he could smile like the best of them and act like everything was okay. And on the side, you know, he was just spending his money hardcore on this drug. And the addiction eventually consumed him to the point of him losing his mind. That night when he finally got caught, he was driving his car over 100 miles per hour on train tracks. His tires had popped. He was literally railing his car on the train tracks. And somehow didn't flip over and didn't die. And he just went joyriding like crazy. And then he went up to the store, and he thought that he had to get in it for some reason. So he ends up climbing up to the top of the store, breaking open the ventilation system on the top of it, crawling into the ventilation system, triggering a silent alarm, and staying there. When the police finally get there and stuff, he freaks out. He gets out the vent, drops down into the store, and eventually gets apprehended by the police and taken into the jail and stuff. And that's whenever he ends up finding, you know, that ministry I was in. So once he found that ministry, he gave a 1.5 years of his life to it before he became a team leader. He's completely sober and changed his life. So those are the two people I'm going to tell you about. Now, I met him, and I met the people that were there at the time, and I didn't really know what to think, because like I said, I was kind of not, I didn't care about God. I didn't not care about God. I just didn't think about God ever. And I just kind of lived in my own little world. So for the next few days, you know, they eventually gave me this Bible. And this Bible was a really beautiful white leatherback old school Bible. It was really thick, kind of big. And it had gold trim edges on the pages. It was in Old English, the King James Version. And it had these beautiful paintings in it. Now this antique Bible, the first thing I did when I got it was I walked over to the chapel and I sat down inside the chapel and I opened the Bible. And the first page I opened the Bible to was this page that had David in it. And David was actually calling out to the Lord. And he was like, Lord, please deliver me, for my enemies have come to me on all sides and will to take my life. And he was asking that, he be delivered from the oppression and all this stuff that was happening to him. And when I read that, it was exactly what happened to me when I was in the cow field. I automatically just hit my knees and I was calling out to God just like that, begging for my life, begging for mercy, telling God I would serve Him, asking for help. And literally I started crying. Just right then, I just started crying. I couldn't help it. It was so amazing that the first scripture I ever read out the Bible, besides that tiny New Testament one, which the guy climbed into the tree, the tax collector, was that verse that exactly applied in my life. And those other verses in the jail cell that were exactly about my life. So literally all this is happening. I'm thinking this can't be a coincidence. There has to be something here on top of all the dreams and stuff that I had and stuff, Well, at this point, I was suffering from PTSD in its ultimate stages. I had night terrors and stuff every night, about this dude coming after me and getting me and finding me. And I didn't live too far away from the place where he was at. I lived maybe 30 minutes away at that point where I was at. So, fear was exactly fresh, and it was something that tried to get me every day that I was there. I thought people were poisoning my food, that they were trying to kill me, that they were trying to set me up, but at the same time I was having this amazing experience with God, and a lot of times it actually drowned that fear out for the most part for a while. And so, to keep going, after I read that verse and stuff, a couple weeks later, or they told me a couple days later that a prophet was coming. And I didn't know who prophets were, I didn't know what they were, I didn't know anything about them. And so I literally was kind of excited. I was like, wow, I'm going to get to meet a prophet. This sounds amazing. I don't know. They talk about they have the spirit of prophecy and they can see things in the future and they can give you gifts and I was really excited. I was like, what the heck is going on here? That sounds amazing. So the couple weeks go by, the prophet shows up. It's just like every other preaching that I'd seen in the church at first. He seemed like an ordinary guy with an ordinary, message and stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a prophet. Oh, okay. I was expecting a lot more, right? So I really enjoyed all the preachings I heard there, by the way, by everybody, including him. So we did praise and worship. He gave his preaching. Everything seemed normal. But at the very end of it, our church had this thing, we did altar call. And there would be people that would use anointing oils, which we believed in, to anoint people's heads and to, speak in tongues and stuff, which we believed in, and I still do. And at that point, I couldn't speak in tongues. And the first time I heard people speaking in tongues in prayer, I was like, well, okay, that's how they're praying, but I'm just going to do it like this, I didn't really condemn it or feel weirded out by it or anything. I just accepted it because that's the type of person I was. I was like, well, all these people are doing it, so apparently it's a thing. I don't really understand it, but I'm not going to shun it. And so, I was sitting there, and he called everybody up for altar call. I went, as I usually do. And he said, the enemy has taken something from you. Ask God to give back what the enemy has stolen from you. And so I asked God to give my soul back, because I remember when I was younger, I actually asked the enemy to take my soul in order that I may have a woman, because I was so lonely. And I was young at this time. I was like 16 maybe, 15. And loneliness was a big thing in my life. I still suffer from it, but I guess after a while you kind of learn how to deal with it. Anyways, I would never try to offer my soul up to any being other than God ever again. Just my life force and my soul and my being is all something I give to God. Now, you know, when he blew on me, I kind of felt like something happened. I felt refreshed. And now when he was blowing on other people, they were falling down, and I never seen that before. And I assumed that people were trying to be nice. I assumed that was just what was happening. I didn't shun it. I didn't harden my heart to it or judge it. I just said, I accepted it. I observed it, accepted it, said, okay, maybe these people are being nice. That's the only conclusion my mind could come up with. So I thought maybe it was a thing they were doing. So I went and stood back at my seat and stuff. And other people were falling down, other people were going back to their seats. And by the time altar call was over, everybody got up and walked off. Well, I was just like, okay, so, you know, that happened and whatever. So I was there worshiping and stuff, and everybody was worshiping. And out of everybody, the prophet looked over at me. And he's like, you, come here. And I looked around, I'm like, me? He's like, yeah, you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go up there to him, and by the way, when I asked for my soul back, I did that silently. I wasn't like somebody to be noticed or noticeable. I was kind of in the back of the crowd with everybody else, and that's just how it was. And so he calls me out of everybody, and I'm like, you know, why me? I don't know if I'm special. Anyway, so he's like, how would you like it if I told you that God has a calling for you? And at that point, I thought in my heart, you know, well, I would be honored. And so I said that, I was like, well, I would be honored. And that was just my response to it. I didn't really think about everything, I just answered. And it was an honest and sincere answer. And so the prophet, he grabs these oils, and he puts them on his finger, and he anoints my forehead with a cross shape. And he says, God has a calling for you. He's going to make you a preacher. And he starts telling me all this other stuff, which I can't really remember, but he basically told me God was going to make me a preacher. And he told me that anything I dream, it will happen. This is a promise of the word and the prophet of God. So, and I'm trying to only dream of pure things and good things, loving things and kind things and compassionate things. And yes, at times I am very lonely. But so this guy ends up touching me and blowing on me, and when he does, I actually lose control of my entire body, and I fall down backwards onto the ground. Now for me, this is the first time that ever happened. I've always had control of my body, and ever since I've had control of my body. When I want to do something, I want to move, it just happens, right? Which is a blessing within itself, but it always happens. But at that point, I had no control over my body. I literally just fell down. And I couldn't explain it, but I didn't rebuke it. I didn't fight against it. I didn't harden my heart towards it. I kept my heart just very open, very receiving, and I observed, because that's what I do. And I observed. And I was like, well, this is happening. Okay. So I'm laying there, and this guy starts circling around me, walking around me, and he's like, God has blessed you, and he's given you a gift. He's given you the gift of the holy tongue. He's like, do you feel that in your stomach? And I didn't feel anything in my stomach, but I felt something in my hands. But I just agreed, and I was like, yes, I feel it. And it felt like when your hands get really, like when they fall asleep, like severely asleep, like it felt 1,000 times more intense than that. Like the tingling sensation within them, and the way it felt was just beyond words on both of them. And he said, speak of the holy tongue in which God has given you. And so, good God, there's cigarettes in the air. It's so gross. And so I started speaking in the holy tongue in which God had blessed me with. Which I was like, So I started speaking in this holy tongue in which God had blessed me with. And whenever I never did that before. I never talked like that before. It happened. It was there. I don't even know how to explain it. It was just part of me now. And so I started speaking in this holy tongue, and everybody was praying and praising God and stuff, and I don't even know, it was amazing. So I get up, after it's over, and I had never felt a joy so surpassing and so amazing in my entire life and being. No drug, no ecstasy, meth, cocaine, crack, any form of ecstasy, any type of marijuana, no sex, pornography, nothing could ever bring me the joy that I felt that day. And I never knew what joy was, and to this day I still haven't really experienced joy like that. And that was joy beyond measurements, beyond words, beyond understanding. And I just felt so happy. I couldn't stop smiling, I couldn't stop laughing. I just felt lighter, I felt amazing, and I just can't explain it, right? So after that, I tried to serve God to my best ability while I was there. I had my moments as a fleshy, cardinal, sinful natured being, and I also had my loving, kind, spiritual, amazing, enlightenment, crazy experiences there. And while I was there, a couple weeks later, I decided to start reading the Bible pretty heavily, and I did. And the Bible, to me, when I was reading it, was like, I can't remember things like verses and addresses, it's what I call them. I can't remember that like ever, and so my mind just isn't wired that way. People are like, well, if you do it more, it's just not my mind. It's not wired that way. Just because yours is doesn't mean mine is, okay? So now when I read it, though, it was like a giant epic movie being played out in my head, like all the way from Genesis all the way to Revelations. I pretty much read every single thing in between, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. It was about God's character. It was about who God is. It was about people that serve God, people that didn't serve God, how people that don't serve God act, how people that do serve God act. It was about disciplines, punishments, even to the point of death. It was about heaven. It was about hell. It was about Jesus and Jesus' forthcoming. It was about all kinds of testimonies and experiences and walks of life. Basically, it's an enlightenment, a tool to enlighten you about who God is, what God likes, what God doesn't like. And so while I was reading all this and stuff during these periods, I had experiences with my friends that were there that I made, and I loved them. I seen some crazy stuff, like there's a manifestation that happened at one point in time, and and this guy was like screaming at the top of his lungs that he didn't believe, and all this stuff, and people were speaking in tongues, and like, it was really crazy, guys, okay? Like, even at one point in time while I was there, I kept having the sexual spirit, like, touch me in certain areas and stuff. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it, because, hey, I'm a lonely guy deprived of sexual pleasure pretty much in every form and sense, and God created man to be with woman, and it's not good for man to be alone, and He did command to be fruitful and multiply, meaning your loins are supposed to be like, hey, I need some, a woman. But you sexually deprive a man long enough, and well, on top of all the other things that happened to me. So I've been single for 7 years, just so you might know that. Not out of choice, but just because no woman has ever... I'm really particular about the women I like and want to date and be with. So I'll get on that another time. So anyway, I had a lot of encounterments with spiritual things while I was there, and even to the point of having prophecy and having these visions in my head, like memories that were there before. Like it was like a memory that hadn't happened, and that's how I can explain prophecy. Every time I've experienced it, it's a memory that comes to me. It's like I remember it, I experience it, I feel it in some way, shape, or form, but it hasn't happened yet. And I'll just speak on the memory, and that memory actually comes into play way, like, not even that far. To explain, the atheist guy that lived next to my pastor's ministry, he was a hardcore atheist. He didn't care about God, he didn't want to hear about God, he didn't want to talk to people that believed in God. He was to the point that he'd even want to sell the place to Pastor Mike, I believe, just because he liked God. So this guy, after years and years of Pastor Mike trying to buy this place from this guy, it was about 2 years that Pastor Mike consistently tried to urge us. He wasn't like all in his face all the time, but every couple months, he'd be like, hey, I want to buy this place, will you please let me, what can I do? He tried negotiating, he tried all kinds of things. This guy would not budge, but he didn't live there no more. It was just an empty house. Well, one day, being my second in charge of the team leader guy, his name was John, he walked out, and we were standing there, and I had this memory in my head, and I was looking at this place, and I'm like, dude, he's like, yeah, I'm like, hey man, I remember standing over in that place and looking out that window at our ministry over here. He's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I remember standing in there and looking out at the ministry. He's like, well, if you mean that Pastor Mike's going to buy that place, you're crazy. Because he's been trying to buy that place for years now, and that dude will not sell to him. He will not, ever. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I didn't think much more about it. Well, about 2 months later, the dude up and out of nowhere sold the place to Pastor Mike for actually a pretty nice price and just disappeared. And so we were moved within that place about a week and a half to 2 weeks later, completely moved into that place, and the building next to us was a ministry. And so I'm just like, what? So that was the first experience I had with prophesization. Well, not the first one, but the first talked about and experienced and in-depth type of one. Those dreams, I believe, were forms of prophesization as well, and stuff like that. So basically, a couple months later, we had this blue van. We shuttled everybody around in to do our donations and stuff, because we were non-denominational. All the food and everything came from food pantries, came from the pastor's pocket, everything. And he went through some hard times trying to keep the lights on for us and trying to keep his family, going, because his job was being a pastor. And so it was hard, It was hard for him. There were times when he went hungry just to feed his family, and they were still, going hungry a little bit, but they were eating something, but he wouldn't even eat, and they were all crying and sad and stuff. And there were times they went without power and stuff. People were like, how could you do that to your family? Well, check this out, guys. He did it because he's a kind person, because he had a dream, he had a goal, he had a heart, he had a ministry, he wanted to help, okay? That's why. And so God, God's blessed his ministry now. His ministry's growing even more. It's prospering even more. And, his church is real, guys. I can say that. His church is real. It consists of the Holy Tongue, which I believe in. Other people don't have to. It consists of anointing oils and anointing of the head, which I believe in, which is very powerful. And anointing things with oils is very powerful. It consists of prayer. It consists of prophecy. It is an active church, guys. It is what we call a living church. That is what a living church is like. It is amazing. It's full of prophecy. It's full of baptisms in the Spirit, baptisms in the water. I mean, I adored that ministry, and I'm so grateful that's where I got saved at. And the Victory Family Church, the same exact thing. Very active, very alive, very amazing. So, you know, a couple months later, the blue van we had and stuff, it was just older, you know, the air conditioner didn't work good in it, it didn't run that great. We wanted something new. We needed something new. And me and my team leader, you know, we both like bass, man. We are all about that bass, I'm not gonna lie. And we'd be listening to Christian rap, which they have some pretty good Christian rap out there. Some of it I don't agree with, but some of it's pretty amazing. And it actually sounds like legitimate gangsta, you know, hardcore, great beat, great lyrics, great sounding voices, you know, just the way they sound when they speak, like it's just amazing. And so we were like bumping some 12s and stuff, some pretty hard 12s in the house, but we wanted a new system for the van. And I listen to all kinds of music, by the way. So one day I was in the van and I was like, you know, I had this memory again. It came to me and I'm like, hey, we're getting a new van. And the guy next to me is like, uh-huh. Yeah, that's about my life right there. When I speak, people are just like, uh-huh, whatever. You're a liar. Alright, so I was like, we're gonna get this new white van and it's gonna be a Chevy. And it's going to have these nice rims on it. It's going to have a brand new air conditioner, brand new heater. It's going to have brand new interior, brand new leather seats. It's going to have a really nice surround sound system in it. It's going to, you know, all these details about it I was giving, right? And no one really heeded what I was saying. That's not the point. The point is God allowed me to experience that. And so about 2 months later, yet again, for basically almost free of charge, this van was donated to us, and it was a white Chevy van. It was the year model was exactly like I said. It was basically not even a whole year old, to like almost 2 years old, and it was a long time ago for me. It was like 8 years ago that this happened. So, you know, it just goes to show that the spirit of prophecy is very real, very active. And the only way I can tell you if you haven't experienced it and you do believe in it is, you know, it's like a memory that's there, but you remember it, but it hasn't happened yet. And I can't explain really how this happens, because I'll get to my beliefs later. That's a whole different video. So basically, a couple weeks later, I was asleep, and I was falling halfway asleep and awake, and that's when I realized I experience the weirdest things when I'm halfway asleep and awake, because I'm awake enough to still hear my surroundings, maybe just a tiny bit, and I'm asleep enough to actually be asleep, but I'm not like super asleep to where I'm like, I don't really understand what's going on around me at all, and I don't know what's happening. But when I was at that point, I had this vision, and it was of Jesus on the cross, and underneath it there were these words that said, I died for your sins. And I ended up waking up really fast out of it, and when I woke up, there was this white feather, this large white perfect feather next to me on the bed. And basically I was going around asking, and there weren't many men in the men's home at that point, because they would come and go a lot, and I was like, hey guys, you know, did you put this on my bed? Did anyone put this on my bed? And everybody kept saying no. Like even Mario said no at first several times, and I was just tripping out about it, like this is amazing, right? So like there are no windows open, there was no ventilations open, the door was open but nobody was there, nobody had been there all day pretty much. They'd been out doing things here and there, on the property, reading their Bibles, doing Bible studies. And so I knew for a fact this was something that God had blessed me with. And I can't explain it, but I think it was just a gift from God, a feather of an angel. So I eventually left the ministry, and when I did, it was just because I felt like I just had to get out of there. I I don't know. I guess I thought I was ready to leave. Plus, there's anxiety and fears and nervousnesses and me wanting to gain more experiences and trying to live on my own. And there was just a bunch of reasons why I left. And when I left, I still suffered from PTSD and stuff, you know. And I went to see a Gulf Coast ministry people, the Gulf Coast mental health people. And when I seen them, I ended up talking to a caseworker that ended up relocating me and bringing me out to a place called Galveston, Texas. And when I stayed there, I was at the Salvation Army. And at the Salvation Army, I was still suffering from a lot of issues. So I went to the mental hospital, and the mental hospital tried to apply me for Social Security, which I wasn't interested in. I just wanted medicine or something to help me out. And God was still working with me. While I was at the mental hospital, there was this priest man, right? I think he was Catholic or something. Not to put Catholics down. I believe that all people are saved if they are wanting to be saved. They love God. They try to fulfill God's ways. They can be saved, okay? God understands more than we could ever comprehend in other people. He's not a simpleton. Sorry. Anyways, so basically, he wore all this gold. He had like a gold ring on. He had gold watch on. He had all this gold stuff on. And he's walking around touching people's heads going, "Bless you, child. Bless you, child. Bless you, child." And so, for some reason, when I looked at him, I felt unrest, unease, like a disturbance within me. And it kind of just made me want to, it grieved me or something. I don't even know how to explain it. And so the guy ends up, right about that time, walking over to me. And I was just, trying to smile and have a nice face or whatever, because that's what I do. I'm not rude to people. And I was like, I really love God. And as soon as I said that, he looked at me and he grinned. And he gave this really weird, dirty look to me and just walked off. Like he just avoided me like the plague. Like I was just so evil and repulsive and disgusting. And I'm thinking, what? What did I do? I did nothing wrong. I was just talking to him. I said, I love God. And when I said that, I'm thinking that the Holy Spirit was there with me, and this dude was he was kind of what we call, I'm not going to say he's a fake, I can't say that, but maybe his walk just wasn't right, his heart, something, and he just fled from me, like I was a demonic, evil creation or something. And I felt, though, that God was talking to me like, some people just aren't right. That's what I felt in my heart. And I'm like, oh, well. So I get out the mental hospital, I go to Salvation Army, I end up staying there for about 2 years, right? And during those 2 years, a Gulf Coast member that was at the Salvation Army, she worked there with the disabled and stuff, she ended up helping me file for my check. Which I was not really, I guess I just was like, well, I might need one because I really can't do work or anything. Every car I seen, I thought was talking, after me, looking at me, every person within it on a cell phone. I thought they were talking about me. I thought people were going to shoot me from with a sniper rifle from 2 miles away and stuff. Like, I was just insane with fear. But I still tried to do God's work. I talked to people about God. I read the Bible. I shared Bible verses with others. I was kind to people. If I had $5 left in my pocket, I would give that $5 to other people. I was a nice person. And towards the end of my wait there, I waited a couple years, probably about 4 years for my Social Security. I was living on a beach at some point in time, and I lived there for a little while. And the beach was actually a good experience for me because I kind of seen where the seawall was. Everything forward was like sand, the ocean, the night sky, the stars, the moon, peace, love. It was amazing. And everything behind the seawall was roads and concrete and like construction work and working women walking back and forth all night, like, you know, because that's all they knew how to do, and drug addicts and drug deals and gunshots and ambulances and chaos and police cars and everything, man, just buildings and crime and chaos. And yeah, there's beauty in that too, you just gotta know how to see it, but mostly chaos, because that's just a majority. And so I really learned a lot on that beach. I learned about creation, and the stars are what really started to enlighten me about what's out there. You know, those are stars, that's space, that's the moon, that's natural, that's the natural hand in which God created it. You know, there's a natural and supernatural hand that God has, and I'll get into that later. And, you know, so the night sky was very beautiful. The waves, the ocean waves were so meditative, so amazing, so peaceful. And I just learned a lot. I got a lot of enlightenment and understanding. Not to mention the side experiences I had of messing up and going through things and stuff like that, you know. I fell into homosexuality a few times because I thought I was gay, because all the men that molested me growing up and stuff, and I struggled with that throughout the years, off and on, until I finally came to the conclusion that men are gross and they're hairy, and I just don't like them, and it's not my thing. I like women. But, you know, I did go through that struggle for a while, and I did get with, you know, quite a few men. I got with probably about 6 or 7 men, something like that. And in my life, I also got with a couple women. And they were loose women most of the time, or pretty much all the time except one. They all cheated on me, they all used me. One of them I was with for 6 months of my life, which was the longest besides my second wife, my second fiance. Basically, my first fiance, she literally broke my heart and shattered me. And it was definitely not something that I want to happen to me again in my life, because it was very sad and very destructive. I had 2 miscarriages. One was with my first, and the second was with my second at 6 months and 4 months, and I mean, it was really saddening and stuff, but I'll get more about that in a second. So, you know, on the beach I learned a lot, and I went through a lot of things, a lot of circumstances and stuff. Well, finally I got approved for my Social Security. At this point I was with this woman named Christina. She was actually a pretty crazy and lost person. And, you know, she ended up cheating on me, she ended up lying to me and all kinds of other stuff. So I ended up breaking up with her. Then I met this guy named Jesse, who I took care of and helped. He was obese, kind of, and, you know, I tried to help him, but he liked everybody, he tried to help too many people, and he was a gay guy, of course, and I was his caretaker, his provider, you know, I, like, gave him baths and stuff like that, and, like, he's a gay guy, of course, like, a lot of gay people I met, that I've met personally, are kind of kind people. I've met some, don't get me wrong, I've met some pretty messed up ones too, but I met some kind gay people, a lot of them that I've met. And so, you know, you want to take all these people in off the streets, you want to help them and stuff, and these people are like crackheads, and they were doing drugs and stuff, and I'm glad to report that I didn't. All I did was smoke pot. But I was cleaning up after all these people, I was doing their chores. They literally took advantage of me, stole my stuff, stole his stuff, and got him kicked out on the street. So after he got kicked out on the street, his dad blamed me, but I couldn't do anything about it, because he would always tell me, you know, this is my house, I can have people over if I want, you know, you can't tell me what to do, and there was nothing I could do. But his dad ended up blaming me for it. So we get in a smaller apartment. He ends up having breathing problems. Water fills up on his lungs because this apartment's so small. And then he eventually drowns and dies, like at the hospital. It's really sad. That's what happened to him, though. The water on his lungs was too much. He couldn't breathe no more, and he died. And so after taking care of him for about a year, His dad really hated me for it. His dad blamed his death on me, all kinds of things. So I ended up moving, and I got my own place finally. Like, my own place, my own name, my own lease, which was my first apartment. Once I got this apartment, I met this chick named Abigail, and she was really cute in like this dorky kind of hot way. She like had these glasses on that was kind of like dorky looking, but she was also hot in like a womany way. And the first time we met, you know, I was burning with desire, so we ended up, you know, getting together. And me and her stayed together for the next about 6 months of my life. And when we first met, she told me she was bisexual, but I figured that meant that she was into chicks and dudes, but I didn't really know her preference. But she was with me at the time, and I figured maybe I could help her, change her, something, you know. And we got together. We hung out all the time, you know, we watched like anime together. She's the one that turned me on to Adventure Time. I really love that anime, cartoon. It's really funny. And we'd smoke pot together, you know, and I really loved her very deeply. But it turns out that she really didn't have the same feelings for me, that she just wanted me for sex, and that's it. And she was really into having orgies and all kinds of other things, which I didn't find out till about 6 months later. So she literally dumped me out of nowhere. Like, she convinces me that she's pregnant. So after a month of being super excited and like every day just researching babies and like how to take care of them, how expensive it's going to be, all this stuff, right? Out of nowhere, she comes up to me and says, "Listen, I'm sorry, but I gotta break up with you." Now, this isn't before this event happens. While we're together, right, and I find out she's pregnant, I prayed to God that if she's meant to be with me, then let her stay, and if she's not, then show me. Well, everybody says, be careful what you ask God for. Hello. So, I prayed to God about this, right? Well, her husband, her ex-husband that she hadn't talked to in 2 years, she says, ends up calling her out the blue, saying he's stranded at College Station, and he needs somewhere to go. So me, being the kind person I am, after she tells me about it and says she's going to go get him and drop him off at the Salvation Army, she drives 3 hours after to pick him up, okay? So I call her and I tell her, you know, I kind of had it put in my heart to help him. So that's what I did. I was like, you can bring him here to our house. He can stay in a guest room that's empty, and, you know, he can live here and until he gets back on his feet. So he gets there, you know, I'm really nice to him, all this stuff. Well, long story short, after, you know, all these days him staying there and us talking and communicating and all this stuff, he convinces me he doesn't have feelings for her anymore, because, you know, I talked to him about it. I didn't want it to be awkward or weird. And she comes to me and ups and breaks up with me. Then out of breaking up with me, okay, which by the way I was convinced she was pregnant, but she told me right when she broke up with me she wasn't pregnant. That was wrong. She ends up leaving, taking her ex-husband with her, and then ends up taking him to her house because she has her own house. And there she engages in having lots of sex with him. Didn't know about this, right? So she broke up with me just because of her freedom restrictions. She knew I wouldn't allow it. She knew I wouldn't have orgies with her or anything. I wasn't like that. So about 5 months later, okay, I'm in despair, by the way. When she breaks up with me, it shatters me. I mean, I'm laying in bed every night crying. I'm broken from it. I'm shattered by it. I mean, at one point in time, this voice came to me saying, just commit suicide. And I was like, no, I'm not going to commit suicide. Because I understood it was man's free will that made them do what they do. It's like, you know, just blame God, hate God, you know, get mad at God, curse God, commit suicide, just throw yourself off this little 2-story window right here and land on your neck and make sure it's done right. Kill yourself. Like, I was in such despair and pain, and these things were coming to me like this. And every time I would be like, no. I felt like when Jesus was being tempted in a desert, and that enemy, that adversary came to tempt him to like throw himself off and do this and do that. Well, I kind of felt like that, because it was literally not my voice, not my thoughts, just out of nowhere, like, kill yourself. It felt so tempting to do, and I'm like, no. Or like, curse God, get mad at him. Look what you did. After all, you prayed to him, and you prayed for a woman and a wife, and you were so faithful, and you try to serve him, and look what he gave you. Look what he did to you, And I'm like, well, I understand that man has free will. That's what ties God's hands. If anything else happens from God, it's considered a miracle, because every individual has free will to say yes or no to something, to do something or not do something. So therefore, it was her free will to break up with me and to hurt me. So for the next year of my life, I was in just agony, guys. But what I decided to start doing as a therapy was I got on video games like Minecraft and Little Big Planet 2, and I built a church on Minecraft, and I built a church on Little Big Planet 2, because I didn't like violent games at that point in time. I was more going over into a transformation, so I played these games that like had a lot of architectural stuff plus innocence to them, and Little Big Planet was innocent, kind of, on a sense of the surface. But I walked in on some lobbies where like teenagers were talking about some pretty messed up, sick, and horrible stuff, like sexually, and I'm talking about all the time. And then they put these mods in the game where these like little sock puppet things had like penises on them and breasts, and like they were singing horrific sexual messed up. I mean, that game turned into the most perverted, messed up, sick game I've ever seen in my life. And that's what people do to innocents. Welcome to the world, guys. Welcome to the world. So anyway, I would actually lead the youth into like, they would tell me if they were going through hard times, or they would ask me stuff like, should I have sex yet and stuff, and they would really come to me with this. They wouldn't come to their parents with these questions, but they would come to me with these questions because they see me as their gamer buddy, and they see me as someone that talked about God and stuff. So, I tell them, no, you shouldn't have sex yet, no, you shouldn't do drugs, and I explain to them why. When you have sex, there's a responsibility that comes with it. For one, there's a lot of emotions that go behind it. There's a lot of heartache that goes behind it if they leave you or if they use you. Plus, there's also things like STDs and sexual transmitted diseases that can happen on top of, you could get a girl pregnant, or you could get pregnant, and that's really a section you don't want to go to. So like, it's educating them on why it's a bad decision to make, why you shouldn't do it, why you shouldn't do drugs. Well, should I smoke pot? My friend wants me to do this. I don't think it's a good idea. The reason is because you get high off that, and then you don't really know how to act on it. You make bad decisions, you do bad stuff that could cause you to get hurt. Plus you get in severe trouble for doing it, and it's against the law, so you can go to jail. And on top of that, juvenile, whatever. And on top of that, it's like, oh, this feels really good, so I want to try other drugs. I want to try drinking now. I want to try, snorting cocaine. Who knows, right? Whatever it leads. So it's a really bad idea, So like, I would advise them on things like that. I had atheist children actually come to God because I would just be their friend, and they knew I was a Christian, and they would hear me talking about God, and not preaching to them, just, every once in a while I might mention talking about God, or if they had a question or something, or just being their friend in general. It just opened their hearts to want to change, right? We're not just recruiting officers. We are people that should have interaction, intimacy, and relationships with other people. It's not just about always knocking at people's doors, not knowing them, and just saying, here's a flyer, come to church. Here's God, I told you about it. It's about just being their friend in general. That is a very important thing in life. So, basically, um, you know, I led atheist children to God and stuff, and this is God working through me, by the way. I ministered to homeless and you know, brought them to God and closer to God, and I even had my own ministry I started up for a bit in my house. That turned out to be a disaster. I really tried to help people, tried to bring people closer to God, and they just wanted to start doing drugs in my house and trying to bring prostitutes in and you know, not caring and getting in fights and bickering and stealing and doing all kinds of horrific things, right? So after a year long of that entire suffering, and then on top of the girl, the first fiance, you know, her breaking my heart and devastating me, well, after that, she ends up showing up about 6 months after we broke up or something, and she told me, well, you know, how are you doing? I'm like, how are you doing? She goes, you know, I was pregnant. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to tell you this. I'm just going to tell you, I was pregnant, but your child miscarried. So on top of everything else that really hurt me about her, that kind of messed me up a little bit. And so, I had a ministry going on in between, like I said, and stuff online. I was doing Bible studies online. We had regular Bible studies we would always do and share experiences and testimonies, and that was really causing me to heal. So then I ended up meeting this woman on the very game I did Bible studies on, and she really wanted to get away from her surroundings. Her mom had just died, her brother was crazy, he kind of pulled a knife on her, and she just wanted to get out of there. So I invited her to come live with me, which a lot of people are like, well, you shouldn't do. There's reasons why you shouldn't do that, guys. It's not just because of the simple thing of it's sin, it's sinful. No, there's reasons for everything. It's literally what makes sin or what causes things to be problematic. Okay? There is a formula to everything in life. So, you know, me and her living together actually wouldn't have been that bad, except I was still really messed up about my first fiance and all that, so I talked about her constantly. I was very distant and cold because that's kind of the person I became after all the relationships I went through previous to Abigail, and then when I was with Abigail and all that happening really just shut me down. And so, you know, I just gamed all the time. That's all I really did. And I was really ashamed when we made love and did things together, so I would treat her kind of bad. In my opinion, or my perspective at the time, it wasn't bad. It was me trying to cover my sins, kind of, you know. When she was pleasing me in certain ways or something like that, you know, I would like keep the blanket over me and her, and to the point of her not being able to breathe and stuff, and I didn't realize I was doing that. You know, I would cause her like to just feel, she thought I was treating her like a whore, basically. The only time I would touch her or kiss her is if we were making love. But I would always be nice to her. I would always be nice to her. I would talk nice to her. You know, I just didn't interact with her, really. Like, we go to movies and stuff, but most of the time I would just be on the game, that's it. And the only time we really had any intimacy or anything like that, or what seemed to be like a real relationship, intimate experience, is whenever I want to make love with her. And then, you know, she got really sick and spiteful about it, and she ended up hating me, so she ended up leaving me. She lied to me and stuff. I caught her in a lie, and she just left me. And I understand that, you know, I get that. And when she left me, it's sad that I got sad by it, but I was just kind of numb, too. And so, you know, then she calls me up after me waiting months for her to come back. I started missing her, you know, but I wasn't like broken or devastated like with Abigail. And she literally told me, you know, on Christmas, when I was with my family and stuff, you know, I'm breaking up with you, I'm not coming back. I was pregnant, you know, but the child miscarried, a bunch of stuff. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but frickin' sucks either way. And so that kind of really messed with me a little more. And ever since her, I've pretty much been alone. I haven't been with nobody. I haven't been in any relationships. I've been a little messed up by things in life, and you know, there's a lot more experiences in between I didn't tell you about. But I've been through a little bit. People have been through worse, and people have not been through as much. You know, that's just life. The experiences differ. But I do want to say this is my testimony. Now I have actually recently moved away from where I used to live, and in a new place that I'm at, you know, I've had a whole new ton of experiences here with homelessness, people mistreating me, people I thought were my friends just turning against me on certain occasions. I had some crazy roommates and some like, it's been crazy. Now I'm actually established in a house with some good roommates. One of them, he's cool. He just has issues, and when he gets set off, you know, he can say some pretty mean things. But the other one, you know, he's really nice and stuff. He's pretty chill. I accidentally broke his laptop last night trying to update Windows 10. And Windows 10 gives me the worst problems in the entire world. I've done 8, Vista, 7, all of that, 8.1, 8.1 Pro. Windows 10 is the only Windows that has literally both computers I've touched with it just broken down, just not worked, had errors, rebooting, all kinds of stuff. It's really annoying. But I can give a praise report and say God has taken care of me unto this day. God has provided for me and been there. God still does care about me and love me. And through all the beings and all the experiences that I've had and endured through, God has still allowed me to be here to tell you guys today that He is real, whether you believe it or not. He does care about you. Besides all the politics of man, there is one truth, and that truth is the teaching you find in the Bible. Forget the technique. Read the teaching about love, compassion, kindness, His character, who He is, what He wants, how amazing, kind, and loving and enduring He really is, and how we should be toward one another. It's that simple. I hope you guys enjoyed this testimony, and I will be uploading a new video about my beliefs, and I don't know if I'm going to do that today, but well, I'll see you guys another time.